Every time I stopped walking, he stopped too. I was about 6 miles into a solo backcountry trail in Utah when I first noticed him. Not close, just a figure walking behind me in the distance. That's normal enough. Trails are shared space. But what bothered me was the spacing. He stayed exactly the same distance behind me for over an hour, not gaining, not falling back. Whenever I slowed down, he slowed. Whenever I stopped to drink water, he stopped too, far enough that I couldn't make out details, close enough that I knew he was watching me. Eventually, I stepped off the trail and pretended to retie my boot. He stopped walking, didn't approach, didn't speak, just stood there on the trail, waiting. I waved casually like hikers do. No response. I started walking again. He did too. After another mile, I stepped fully off trail and moved about 30 yards into thicker brush. He walked past the spot where I'd entered. Didn't look around, didn't call out, just continued straight ahead. I stayed still for 5 full minutes. Then I came back onto the trail. He was gone. No side trails, no fork, no place to exit quickly without making noise. I finished the hike uneasy but trying to rationalize it until I reached the trailhead. There were no other cars. None. Mine was alone in the lot. I checked the sign-in sheet at the board. Only one name for that day. Mine. I drove away fast, and I kept checking my rearview mirror the entire way home, because sometimes someone doesn't need to approach you. They just need you to know they're there. There was no road on the map, but the cabin had a fresh padlock. I was hiking a backcountry trail in Idaho when I found the cabin. It wasn't marked, wasn't on my GPS, wasn't listed on any trail map, just sitting about 100 yards off the main path behind a thin line of trees. Old wood exterior, tin roof, single front door, no chimney smoke, no visible windows from the trail. I shouldn't have approached, but curiosity wins sometimes. There was no road leading to it, no tire tracks, no footpath worn into the grass, just untouched ground. When I got closer, I noticed something strange. The padlock on the door was brand new, shiny, unweathered, recently secured. I stepped around the side of the cabin. No footprints in the dirt, no recent disturbance. The grass around it was tall and unpressed, meaning no one had walked there recently. But the lock was fresh. I leaned closer to the door, and from inside, I heard movement, not shifting boards, not animals, footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing from one side of the cabin to the other. I stepped back immediately. The footsteps stopped. Then, from inside the cabin, I heard a voice. Soft, calm, go back. Not aggressive, not loud, just direct. I didn't respond. I didn't test the door. I backed away slowly, and as I reached the tree line, I heard the padlock click. From the inside, there's no road to that cabin, no access trail, no sign anyone lives there. I checked satellite maps when I got home. There is no structure in that location, but I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. Sometimes the woods don't hide things from you. Sometimes they show you just enough. He was standing under the bridge, watching me cross it. The trail runs over a narrow wooden bridge about 4 miles in. It crosses a slow-moving creek, maybe 20 feet down. The boards creak when you step on them. You can hear someone crossing from either end. I stepped onto it mid-afternoon. Halfway across, I heard something below, not water movement, breathing. I stopped walking. The boards creaked under my boots. I looked down between the planks. Under the bridge, Standing ankle deep in the creek was a man, looking straight up at me. He wasn't wet above the knees, meaning he hadn't just stepped in. He'd been standing there, still, watching. I stepped back slowly, toward the side I came from. He mirrored me, not climbing, just repositioning to stay directly beneath me. I didn't speak. I didn't ask what he was doing, because his eyes never left mine, and there was no expression on his face. When I reached the end of the bridge, I stepped off. He didn't follow. I waited 5 seconds. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I hit the trailhead. There were no other vehicles in the lot, no wet footprints near the water access point downstream, and no reason for someone to stand under a bridge in ankle-deep water for who knows how long. I think about that a lot, because he wasn't hiding. He wanted me to see him. There was only one path up to the overlook, so explain how he was already standing there. It was late afternoon when I decided to push the last mile up to the ridge overlook. I'd done the trail before. Steep, narrow switchbacks, no alternate routes. As far as I knew, I was alone that day. I hadn't passed anyone in over 2 hours. The overlook is a rock shelf that juts out over the valley. No guardrail, just open air and a long drop. When I reached the final bend before the clearing, I slowed down to catch my breath. That's when I saw Boots, standing still, just beyond the curve. I stepped around fully. A man was standing at the very edge of the overlook, facing the valley, completely still, mid-40s maybe, plain hiking clothes, no pack. That part struck me first. No water, no gear, no jacket, just standing there. I gave the usual nod as I approached. Evening. He didn't turn around, didn't respond, didn't shift his weight. I walked past him and sat on the rock about 10 feet away. The valley below was quiet. No wind, no birds. After about a minute, I said, half joking, bit too close to the edge for me. Nothing. I glanced sideways. He hadn't moved. Then I noticed something else. There were no footprints in the dust near the edge, including mine. The dirt was dry and powdery. It should have shown something. I stood up slowly and took a step back. That's when he turned his head. Not his body, just his head, farther than a neck should comfortably allow, and looked directly at me. His face was calm, too calm. He smiled slightly and said, "You're not supposed to be here yet." Before I could respond, a gust of wind hit hard enough to make me step back instinctively. When I looked up again, he was gone. There's no side path, no drop-off point, no trees close enough to hide behind, just open cliff. I left immediately, and I've never gone back to that overlook, because I don't know what I wasn't supposed to be there for. I zipped my backpack shut. Twice. It was open when I turned around. I was hiking a loop trail in Montana, about 6 hours total. I stopped midway near a ridge to eat and drink. No one else around. I remember clearly zipping my backpack shut after grabbing a granola bar. I always double-check. Habit. About 15 minutes later, I felt something off. That instinct again. I stopped walking and looked down. My backpack was unzipped halfway, wide enough for something to reach inside. I froze. I hadn't felt it open. I hadn't heard it. I slowly slid it off and checked contents. Nothing missing. But my knife, which I keep in the top pocket, had been moved. It was sitting sideways now, not clipped, like someone had taken it out and put it back incorrectly. I told myself maybe I rushed it. Maybe I didn't secure it properly. I zipped it tight again. 5 minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. Close. I spun around. Empty trail. But the brush about 10 feet off the path shifted. Low movement. Parallel to me. I didn't run. I walked faster. The movement kept pace. Then stopped. I finished the hike quickly and reached the lot. There was only one other car there. Old. Covered in dust. I never saw another person on trail. But when I got home, I unpacked. And in the bottom of my bag, under my spare shirt, was a small rock. Smooth. Black. Not from that region. I don't collect rocks, and I didn't put it there. He knew my name, but he wasn't on the schedule. I was hiking in a national park I visit often enough to know most of the rangers by sight. Midweek. Light traffic. About 3 miles in, I passed a ranger, standing just off the trail. Full uniform, hat, radio, sidearm. He nodded as I approached. "Afternoon, Daniel." I slowed. I hadn't introduced myself. My name isn't printed on my pack. I asked if everything was okay. He smiled slightly. "Just keeping an eye on things." His tone wasn't friendly. It wasn't hostile either. Just flat. I asked if there'd been any bear sightings. He said no. Then added, "Just don't go off trail today." I hadn't mentioned going off trail. I hadn't planned to. But something about the way he said it made it feel like a warning. I continued hiking. About 20 minutes later, I reached a fork. He was standing there, ahead of me. Same posture, same calm expression. There's no way he could have passed me. There's only one trail between those points. I asked how he got ahead. He didn't answer, just said, "You're almost there." "Almost where?" I turned around, walked back toward the previous stretch. He wasn't behind me. He wasn't in front. He was nowhere. I reached the visitor center later that afternoon and asked about him. Gave a description. The staff looked confused. They only had 2 rangers on shift that day. Neither matched, and neither had been assigned to that section of trail. I don't hike that area alone anymore, because I don't know how he knew my name, and I don't know what I was almost at. I put my fire out completely. So explain to me why I woke up to smoke. I was solo camping in a state forest in Tennessee. Nothing remote, but far enough from the main road that you don't get casual foot traffic. I'm careful with fire. Drown it. Stir it. Drown it again. That night I was especially careful because the ground was dry. I watched the last ember go black before turning in. Around 3 a.m., I woke up coughing. Not violently, just enough to notice. The inside of my tent smelled like smoke. At first I thought the wind shifted and carried some lingering scent. Then I saw it, orange flicker, through the nylon wall of my tent. I unzipped it slowly. My fire pit, the one I'd drowned, was burning again. Not roaring, but active. Flames licking up from the center, and someone was sitting on the other side of it. I couldn't see their face clearly. Just a silhouette. Still, watching the fire, not moving. I stayed inside the tent and said, calm as I could, "Evening." The silhouette didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't shift. The fire popped loudly. For a split second, the light flared brighter, and the space across from the fire was empty. No footsteps, no retreat, no crashing brush, just gone. I stepped out with my flashlight. The fire was real, burning strong, but there were no fresh logs in it, no additional wood, just my soaked coals, somehow reignited. I didn't sleep again, and I didn't camp there a second night, because I know what a dying fire looks like, and that wasn't it. I came back to the parking lot. and my truck wasn't where I left it. I was hiking solo in Washington State. Nothing extreme, just a 5-mile loop I'd done before. The trailhead lot was small, gravel, maybe space for 8 vehicles. When I arrived that morning, mine was the only truck there. I remember that clearly. About 4 hours later, I returned, and my truck wasn't in the lot. For a split second, I thought it had been stolen. Then I noticed something strange. The lot looked different. Same size, same gravel, but the trees surrounding it weren't the same shape, and the information board near the entrance had a different map posted. I walked the perimeter slowly. There were tire tracks, but none fresh. No sign my truck had been there recently. That's when panic started creeping in. Had I somehow exited the wrong way? But this was a loop. There was only one access road. Then I saw it. At the far end of the lot, parked nose in against the trees, was my truck. But it wasn't how I'd parked it. I always reverse into spots. It was pulled straight in, and the driver door was slightly open. I approached slowly. Inside, everything looked untouched. Keys were still clipped inside my bag. Nothing missing. But the seat was pushed back farther than I leave it, like someone taller had sat there. I checked the odometer. It had 3 more miles on it than when I'd arrived. No other vehicles entered the lot while I was hiking. No one passed me on trail, and there's only one road in and out. I drove home without stopping, and I don't hike that loop anymore, because I'm certain of 2 things. I parked that truck myself, and I never left the trail. There were only supposed to be 3 of us, but when I counted the sleeping bags, there were 4. A few years back, I went on a 3-day backpacking trip with 2 friends in Colorado. We weren't deep wilderness guys, but we knew enough not to do anything stupid. We hiked about 9 miles in and found a flat clearing near a shallow stream. No official campsite, but no sign saying we couldn't use it either. We set up 3 tents in a loose triangle. Everything normal. Dinner, fire, a couple beers. Around midnight, I woke up needing to pee. I stepped outside with my headlamp on low. That's when I noticed something off. Near the edge of the clearing, about 15 feet past our tents, there was a dark lump on the ground. Long, rectangular. I walked closer. It was a sleeping bag, laid out flat, zipped, facing our tents. My first thought was one of my buddies had moved it as a joke. I walked back and checked. Both of their tents were zipped, both of them snoring. I went back to the sleeping bag. It wasn't one of ours. Different brand, different color, and there were no other items around it. No backpack, no boots, no food, no tent. Just a sleeping bag laid out like someone had been watching us. I didn't wake my friends. I didn't unzip it either. I went back into my tent and didn't sleep. At sunrise, I checked again. The sleeping bag was gone. No drag marks, no prints, nothing left behind. We packed up without discussing it much. But when we hit the trailhead, there were only 2 other cars in the lot. Both dusty, neither recently driven. There weren't any other hikers signed in that weekend, and I still don't know who laid that sleeping bag out in our clearing, or why it was facing us.